right? Because MassTimber is very popular. Everyone listening to the podcast knows that. They've all seen the hockey stick on the Woodworks website, but we think 2446 is just going to make that growth curve just straight up and down. I mean, it's it's a good bridge between the lack of knowledge out there and kind of the incentive to make it happen.
We think of it like in renewable energy, the wind, wind generation, for example, was really kind of slow to get off the ground in California. Once those state level mandates kicked in, requiring utilities to have a certain percentage of their, power source come from, renewables, wind, straight up. And so we see that same thing happening with MassTimber.
This is the MassTimber Group Show. I'm Brady, and today I caught up with the team behind Fabric MassTimber, soon to be California's first MassTimber producer. Their CEO, Scott Ehlert, and Mark Little, their Director of Product Innovation, took me through their plans to use MassTimber to address California's wildfire problems and the housing crisis. Their approach to MassTimber comes with a high degree of services and support so that these buildings can become a reality. And last, if you like these podcasts, subscribing to the channel is the biggest compliment you can give us. So with that, let's get into it.
Hi, I'm Scott Ehlert. I'm the CEO and founder of Fabric MassTimber, and we are working on opening California's first MassTimber factory, working at the intersection of solving California's housing, wildfire, and climate crises.
And I'm Mark Little, Director of Product Innovation for Fabric MassTimber. My remit is really to understand what we're making, how we're making it, what we're making it with, and who our customers are, what their needs are.
Yeah, well, that's exciting, guys. I've talked to a lot of folks that have said, why is there not a MassTimber facility in California? So it sounds like you guys are building one. How did this all come about? Tell me the background. How did we get from crazy idea, let's build MassTimber, to hey, this is happening?
Well, we still, have a lot of work to do for sure, but we've been working at this for a really long time. We started working on, the idea of bringing MassTimber to California about 5 years ago. My background was in strategy consulting. I worked in kind of brand, customer experience, and design strategy for big global firms and worked with a lot of companies in the housing and construction space. And just saw an incredible need for delivering new building materials and methodologies to deliver the volume of housing that California needs. I left my consulting career to solve that, right? Just kind of started with a blank piece of paper and said, how do we make this happen? And spent about a year just kind of diving deeper into the industry. I had a lot of experience at that C-suite level working with big companies. And so I had a great kind of strategic kind of lens into these things, but the tactical side of it all and execution, definitely needed more research. So I spent about a year just asking questions and building relationships and talking with builders and developers, contractors and architects and engineers and planning departments, right? Just banging on every door possible to just try to unpack, this, kind of Gordian knot of housing supply in California. For those that don't know, California has really put a pretty monstrous number out there for new housing that needs to be built in the state to meet affordability. Just in the last couple of months, the median home price in California broke $900,000 for the first time ever. So when we think about housing affordability, it's double. The median home price here is double what it is nationally. So it's a beast of a problem. And the state has identified the need to build 2.5 billion units of housing in the next essentially 5-6 years to meet that demand and actually just to control the continually skyrocketing cost of housing. Again, this is just kind of a beast of a problem that, current traditional building methods and methodologies just don't have a solution for, especially when you kind of factor in some of the macro problems that California is dealing with around, labor. Really, that's the big one, right? It's labor supply and skilled trades. Those numbers are dropping across the state, ironically, kind of heavily tied to the cost of housing, right? There's not a lot of, timber framers, wood framers that can afford the $350,000 a year income that you need to be able to buy a house in San Jose, for example, right? And so we're losing a lot of that workforce. It's not being replenished. And so how do you build the volume of housing that we need, a time frame that we need it with a fraction of the workforce that is required to build that volume of housing? Spent a lot of time looking at different prefab technologies, modular, panelized, and there was some interesting stuff in there, but there was there's a big, thick graveyard of companies in the modular space. And there's a lot of good reasons for that, right? It's a really tough business, and it's tough to get traction in the industry. When I came across MassTimber, that one felt very different. That was, looking at that process of that, it very much was aligned with my background in kind of system design and, kind of systemization of the process. And so that just really kind of clicked. It was like, here we have a solution that can meet the kind of speed of construction and the efficiency of construction, but in a material and a methodology that plugs much more into the existing system. So we're not demanding a complete kind of change of the industry, but more of something that kind of amplifies what everybody's already doing today. So, yep. And then you tie that to the wildfire crisis in our state. As we were doing research on this and just trying to wrap our heads in the early days around MassTimber, California was on fire, from coast to coast and border to border. There was huge, massive fires across the state. And so we started attending all these forest management task force meetings in Sacramento and really kind of diving into that problem and learning about the tremendous volume of biomass and wood fiber in our forests that needs to be removed. And the state is really kind of desperate to incentivize use of that. Right now, it's all waste, right? It's all waste material. This is a problem common across the West, but no more acute than in California. And so that was really kind of the genesis moment of Fabric as a company. It was looking at the need to remove a tremendous amount of material from our forests, on the other hand, needing a tremendous amount of new buildings and need those in higher density infill locations away from wildfire risk, right? So we need to go more vertical on that. MassTimber is the natural bridge between those two things, and that was really the beginning of Fabric. And then we basically spent the last several years, figuring out how to take that from an idea into an actual viable business.
Thank you for sharing that. I think you guys are bringing the intersection, like you said, of two very important topics, right? Housing and the environment, specifically our forests. How much of California's Assembly Bill 2446 is playing into your conversations and your thought process moving forward?
Yeah, very much so. When we look at what's happening, kind of at the macro level in the state, the need for new housing is a big driver, but builders are also, they're being asked to do a tremendous amount with less and under an increasingly more complicated environmental and regulatory regimen.
And I was just going to say, I'm sorry, I just realized that many people might not know what AB 2446 is. Can you unpack what that is?
Yeah. So AB 2446 was a bill that was signed 2 Septembers ago. It was part of a big climate package signed by Governor Newsom. But it was kind of a sleeper component in all the other ones that were more about energy use and renewable energy. And this was kind of a piece that really kind of slipped under the radar a little bit, but have really kind of profound impact on our built environment and how we build and the construction industry overall in California. When we think about California's construction industry, this is a $145 billion a year industry in the state, right? It's a monster of a business ecosystem. And AB 2446 is an embodied carbon bill that requires a 20% reduction in embodied carbon in building materials by 2030 and a 40% reduction by 2035. And that impacts about 70% of that $145 billion construction industry, right? It's commercial buildings over 10,000 square feet and residential buildings over 5 units, right? So an incredibly broad swath of the total volume of construction that we produce in the state. And so, you can see that the state of California is taking, the climate crisis seriously. And, they're really driving, this kind of top-down adoption of more sustainable bio-based building materials. And we believe that, even though, I'm sure most of the people listening to this will know that California is the largest market in North America for mass timber. 1 out of 7 buildings approximately are built in the state. But with AB 2446 kicking in, we just see this being really one of the largest markets globally, if not the largest market globally. And, we've talked with the folks that are writing the actual letter of the law that was signed and putting in the details, and it's moving forward as it was passed, right? These are very aggressive mandates that the state is committed to see it through.
And I think that might be a good way to kind of enhance adoption, right? Because mass timber is very popular. Everyone listening to the podcast knows that. They've all seen that the hockey stick on the Woodworks website, but we think 2446 is just going to make that growth curve just straight up and down. I mean, it's it's a good bridge between the lack of knowledge out there and kind of the incentive to make it happen.
We think of it too, like in renewable energy, the wind wind generation, for example, was really kind of slow to get off the ground in California. Once those state level mandates kicked in, requiring utilities to have a certain percentage of their power source come from renewables, wind straight up, right? And so we see that same thing happening with MassTimber. Concern and the risk is that it disincentivizes construction. Construction is already so expensive in California. New construction, to pencil in like Los Angeles, your hard costs are like $550 a square foot, right? Like in that range, right? For multifamily, it's really just an incredibly expensive market. So we don't want AB 2446 to slow down our already kind of anemic kind of housing market. I think that there's ways, and the state is very much looking into carrots to incentivize this. This is where we see our role as a manufacturer in providing a high level of kind of services for builders, so that they can have that knowledge and how to build efficiently, how to adopt this new material that doesn't kind of upend all of their processes. It's not as intimidating or as daunting as one might think.
So working with the design and build teams, it sounds like you do more than just sell CLT or glulam. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I mean, our approach is really to deliver projects, not just products. I think there's definitely players in the industry who just want to sell billets and be done with it, and then have secondary manufacturers take care of the rest of it. So we want to offer that level of full service of fabrication, but also on the front end, really adopting a very robust customer service experience, really understanding, what the customer needs are and how can you make that process much more sophisticated, efficient, accessible, transparent. I think all these things are really keywords for our kind of customer experience platform that we're trying to, build into the process. So really thinking, taking all the learnings from all the guys who've gone through this before and done a great job and have kind of evolved this way organically, we're taking that knowledge and starting there. So I think, hopefully that's a big advantage for us in the future as we have this very, very robust customer service experience.
When we look at, again, going back to the California market, that's obviously our core focus is serving our local, kind of regional state here. There's 300,000 licensed general contractors in the state of California. If you look at the number who's actually have built with MassTimber, it's basically on Mark and I's fingers, right? Like it's not a lot, right? So how do we scale this, right? How do you scale MassTimber delivery and project delivery to grow that base of contractors that feel comfortable and confident, speccing their projects, putting timelines together, trade coordination for a MassTimber project. So, while other states like Oregon or provinces like BC, for example, even Colorado has a MassTimber coalition, right? Like California doesn't have that yet, and so a lot of that, the efforts of like Woodworks and other trade organizations are incredibly powerful, but a lot of that education and that knowledge needs to come from the manufacturer on the ground, and so we want to empower just a much broader base of builders out of that pool of 300,000 to feel that they too can tap into the benefits that MassTimber brings.
For sure. And so if we're looking at California as having like a very large demand for MassTimber, like currently, but also moving forward, what are you guys doing to attract California customers that might be a little different than take your pick of any other manufacturer across the globe? Like, why would people be coming to Fabric?
If I may, Brady, just to push back just a little bit of that thinking, yes, we obviously will be competing against other MassTimber manufacturers, but that's not where our mindset is, right? This is about organically growing the MassTimber base in California and conquering business from concrete and steel. If we spend our days worried about what, the existing players in the industry are doing, then we've already lost, right? Like we've already kind of lost the plot and have missed a much bigger opportunity. So while, yes, we'll be bidding against people on those signature, library projects and whatnot, and college buildings, right? Like those are always going to be like hot items to bid against. We're really kind of focused on that organic growth, and as Mark alluded to, like building that customer experience platform. Again, that's tapping into our background. So I don't think we've touched on Mark's background yet as well, but that's what we feel like we can draw people into our orbit. Right? Is like giving them the tools to do that early feasibility. Giving them design tools to test their site, to educate and inform their design teams, kind of best practices, right? Standardized details. We're very much kind of thinking of, in project delivery, the kit and parts conversation, everybody and design systems, all the manufacturers are talking about that. But how do we kind of standardize certain aspects of that? How do we empower, more kind of sophisticated developers and builders who have their own? How do we create new parts together, right? And so it's really kind of dialing up or dialing down that level of service based on the sophistication and the needs of the customer.
Peel back a little bit of your background for us, and then tell us
Sure.
how that plays into the
Yeah,
conversation.
no, that's a good segue. I mean, my career started in architecture and experience design. So I started off with a firm called 8 Inc., which was the company that worked with Steve Jobs to design the Apple Store back in the day. So, I spent, years and years and years back at 8 Inc. working on understanding this kind of crossover between the environment and the experience for its users. So I've always had this kind of user-centric, customer-centric focus. So that took, I was with 8 Inc. for almost 20 years. I was a principal there for about 10 of those years, did projects for, tons of companies that are very progressive, Apple, Tesla, Nike, Virgin. And those were all really based on this heavy, robust, sophisticated customer experience. So that led to, the multiple iterations of my career, but most recently I was at Google as design and strategy lead at their R&D for the built environment lab, which was kind of an innovation lab to think about the future of Google buildings, the spaces, the workplace technology. We were doing a lot of work with MassTimber. We were doing a lot of work with prefabrication, a lot of work with kits of parts. So all these things kind of, combine them together, I think is a kind of a key aspect of what we're doing again at Fabric MassTimber. And I think what drew me to what Scott's doing is he's, obviously the core of what Fabric MassTimber is built on is inspiring, but he's really working hard to build a very, kind of differentiated team. And I think that's one of the ways that we can, again, talk about ourselves as being differentiated, right? Like we're coming at this from a design, a systems thinking, a customer experience lens, but also that very practical kind of manufacturing experience, engineering, design assist experience lens. So I think combining all those things together is kind of where the industry's headed, and we kind of want to start there and just go for it.
What about production capabilities? Like, have you guys figured out like what kind of or what size of panels you're doing? What kind of fabrication capabilities? Has that all been locked in yet?
Yeah, I think I think we're about 80% there at this point. We've done quite a bit of factory concept work. We've built out really robust models, so we have a good sense of what our output needs to be to meet kind of current and 10-year timeline, market demand in California and regionally as well. So I think we've got a pretty good idea of that product mix and those manufacturing capabilities.
I was going to say it goes past just the production part of it, right? Because the production isn't necessarily the hard part, right? Obviously we're going with very sophisticated automated systems that are proven, that are kind of the industry standard. So that part of it isn't that. I mean, it's really hard. But the bigger piece of the puzzle, again, is that front end, that customer part, the tools that we can empower our customers with. But then on the back end, all the fabrication, all the CNC, all the connection detailing, all those kind of the hardware installation, all those things that kind of become bottlenecks for some. We want to understand where those existing bottlenecks are and kind of adapt our facility design around those so that we don't have those same difficulties.
I was looking on the website and I see a whole team up there. So have you guys already started diving into some of those components?
Yeah, absolutely. We've kind of broken out the core capabilities and competencies that we want to bring to the market, and are kind of plugging those holes with top talent across that. And so we'll be actually kind of rolling out some new announcements on the team shortly as well. I think being in California has its advantages, right? There's a really deep talent pool here. It's a really attractive place to live. People want to be kind of part of the action, and California, gives that. So, I think while obviously, building out the workforce and the talent pool to deliver on this is always going to be a challenge, I think we do have a leg up in that. We do have a really kind of attractive kind of value prop and story and brand that we're building that's drawing people to it, and it's a really enticing opportunity as well.
Yeah, I think just to dig a little bit deeper into that, ready to unpack it a bit. I mean, we've identified the roles that we think are important to build out early. Those include, bringing on an engineering partner who can help us design a team around the engineering and design assist opportunity for us. We've brought on a head of digital manufacturing who's got a deep experience with robotics and digital fabrication. So we want to, again, we're kind of coming at this with that. We know what the end goal is and the end state that we want to be, so we can kind of reverse engineer our factory to get to that place.
Got it. And so where are we at on the timeline for, seeing some fabric mass timber roll out the end of the factory?
Yeah, well, if everything goes according to plan, which it won't, but if everything does, then we're looking, at best case scenario, end of 2027, but most likely, mid 2028 is probably more feasible timeline for opening. We do have some, kind of preliminary kind of pilot factory stuff that we're working on, in between now and then, right? There's stuff that we can build out on. And start to kind of iterate on those processes, especially that, if we're thinking of it, if what we're doing is project delivery, right? Master project delivery. We've got a pilot factory in the works now that will really start to build out those capabilities, both on the physical manipulation and logistics side, all the way up through to the digital systems, and really starting to kind of staff that out and build out that really kind of competent and skilled workforce that can do that.
Well, how are you guys sourcing the fiber that's going into your products? Like, how are you working with existing landowners and mills, and how does that whole kind of supply chain work for you guys?
Yeah. So I think, one of the reasons, as you kind of touched on the very top of the podcast was, everybody's kind of looking around and wondering when or why there's no MassTimber, when a MassTimber factory is coming to California, or why there isn't one today. And I think there's a widely held belief that there's just not enough fiber in the state to support a MassTimber manufacturer. And I think that misperception worked to our benefit, and that it gave us the runway to pursue this. But there are, some really strong and capable milling groups in the state of California, and they do produce they do have the fiber basket, and they do produce the raw materials at scale that are needed to supply this. Everything from the lamb stock grade Doug fir for GLT, all the way through to, the full spectrum of SPF, for CLT, right? And so we've been, very early in the process. One of the best bits of advice that we got from the big European players, and I love the kind of collaborative nature of the business, and how much information sharing there is. But one thing that we got early from the Europeans was get really close to the folks that cut the wood, that cut the logs. And those are your best friends, right? Because without that, then you've got nothing. And so, that was something that, over the last several years, we've really just taken the time to build those early relationships, to get those letters of support from all the big milling groups within California, to let them know that we're real, that we're pushing this thing forward, and that they can, start to get behind what we're doing. And we've received tremendous support from the local milling industry. They recognize that, yes, they want to see, greater demand for their product, but they also want to see healthier California forests. And they're kind of on the front lines of the wildfire risk, right? Like all of their timberlands and their sourcing are at, great jeopardy due to the overgrowth in California's forests. So, there's a lot of support there in working collaboratively with the mills and working with them in strategic partnerships to not only get the supply of existing materials that we need, but to also kind of experiment, right, and to really kind of push and work together to identify the fiber baskets and the species that we can get at volume that can support new CLT and GLT layups, and then have that landscape impact with the wildfire component.
And I think there's been a lot of support, as Scott said, from the industry, but also on the state and federal level. So Cal Fire and U.S. Forest Service, we've received grants from both for, trying to push the fiber usage specifically to California's forests in MassTimber products. We're working with Oregon State to really do some testing on some fibers that are typically not seen in MassTimber that could be appropriate for GLT or CLT. So I think there's just, in an industry that, it's very difficult to do what we're trying to do, as it's very difficult to get the wood if we're not vertically integrated. So how can we build this kind of vertically integrated organization by proxy, right? Like building those deep relationships with the mills so that we can work hand in hand with them as partners versus just customers.
Got it. And is that gonna draw all of your attention and resources until that 2028 timeframe, or you guys have something you're working on in between then? Like what's next in the immediate future?
Yeah, well, we have and have been working on building systems. So as Scott alluded to, Fabric kind of started as a multifamily housing mass timber kit parts solution. So we've taken that as kind of a parallel path as we, build the factory out. We have opportunities much sooner than then with groups to help, implement mass timber solutions specifically for homeless housing. So we've kind of taken our initial work on the multifamily housing system and adjusted it to be appropriate for a homeless housing solution, which we think is something that's incredibly critical for us. I mean, everyone is aware of the homeless housing crisis everywhere, but in California, it's super acute. I mean, there's over 180,000 people that are homeless in the state. The state's dumping billions of dollars into trying to solve it, but the solutions are all kind of falling a bit flat, right? It's there are a lot of prefabricated solutions out there, but we think we can do better. We think with a mass timber-based system, we can be at parity with many of those systems. We can build more sustainably. We can build, solutions for housing these people that's much more draws on the biophilic benefits of mass timber. And, a big differentiator for us in that space is density. So, a lot of these groups have been working with kind of tiny home solutions, which are just individualized boxes on a site, which is super inefficient from a site planning perspective. So banking on density as a good differentiator. So for instance, we're working with a homeless housing group in Oakland, California called YSA, who have an existing tiny home village in Oakland, kind of out near the airport. And that's a series of essentially tough sheds on trailers. So we're working with them to expand their offering on the existing site. And we can fit 32 of our units on the footprint of 4 of their existing units. So if you can imagine, I mean, that's one way to draw more services to more people, is to really have more efficient planning on site. So we're working with them to build out up to 100 units on a space that currently houses 27 units. So huge opportunities there for, the density aspect of it, the biophilic aspect of it. And the other part that we think is really cool about what we're doing is that our system is demountable. So it's robust enough to be assembled and disassembled and reused or stored in multiple uses, because a lot of these providers are on temporary sites, they're on parking lots, they may not be there for more than a year or two. So we want to design a system that was demountable and reusable and storable if they need to store it. It's not a volumetric modular system, it's a kind of flat pack system. So it can be stored offsite in a much more compact footprint than a typical tough shed, essentially.
Yeah, I love that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And that really just kind of goes back to just our underlying philosophy, right, of kind of looking at the kind of macro challenges facing California, and how do we create a regional based solution that are designed specifically to kind of maximize the impact that we can have on these problems, right? And then provide a lot of, benefits as well, right? Like it doesn't hurt that, mass timber is not only an incredibly effective material and solution, but it's beautiful, right? It leads to really incredible design. So, as Mark is talking about in the homeless application, the biophilic aspects, right? Here's people that have lived, and this group, why I say that we're working with, they specifically target homeless youth, right? So we're looking at young people in their, late teens, early 20s that have been on the streets and have had really, really tough lives, right? And so how can we give them a calm, an environment that does not feel like an industrial box, but something that feels like a calm, soothing environment for them to receive those kind of recovery services and reacclimation services in.
Yeah, and I should give a shout out. Our partners in this, as we design it, are Hacker Architects in Portland, Home Structures in Portland, and Ehlert, who's helping us with a lot of the envelope design. So this is a kind of a world-class dream team of mass timber folks, really putting their best minds into a problem that's typically doesn't get that kind of attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. And that goes back to, again, our kind of really engaging with the people that we want, with the industry, right? Working with, when we think about that customer approach, how do we work with the industry as it exists today, work with the folks that are kind of driving mass timber adoption and driving the knowledge of mass timber, and incorporate their work and their thinking into our process, so that we're not coming in thinking that we have all the answers, right? I think something that I learned from the early research and digging into the prefab world was how many, outsiders came to the construction industry and kind of looked down their nose at, the construction folks as, these backwards, kind of, Neanderthals, right? And I just don't, I think they couldn't be more wrong, right? Like, I feel like, we've all really kind of humbled ourselves in this process, and that there's so much incredible institutional knowledge, and we want to tap into that and help, create tools that accelerate that, and not, think that we're going to disrupt the industry, right? Like, I can't think of a single conversation I've had with a builder or an engineer that wants their process disrupted, right? Like, they want to minimize disruption as much as possible, minimize risk. And so I think we could do that by engaging with really smart folks like Hacker and Ehlert and Holmes, and learning those best practices and learning about what makes their clients tick, and how we can better serve both the design team as well as the end client.
Yeah, I think that's a very intelligent and needed approach. And yeah, I'm looking forward to watching what you guys do. I have one more question for you before we get to our last question, and it's an easy one. How can people find out more about what you're doing and get in contact with you?
The Fabric website, so it's fabricmasstimber.com. You can reach out to us just on our generic email. You can also reach out to us individually. Can we share our emails? Do we need to say them, or?
I'll link them down below.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If you're interested in talking, again, while we're primarily focused on California, we're looking at, regional Southwest states as well. And serving those underserved markets and building that customer base there. So if you're in Nevada, Arizona, Utah, right, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can support your projects as well.
Link all that down below. I encourage everybody listening to connect with you guys, find out more about what you're doing. My last question for you, and we'll start with Mark this time. You've got somebody in an elevator. You've got 60 to 90 seconds to tell them why MassTimber is awesome, what you guys are doing, and what you're hoping to do and impact in the California world. What do you say to that person?
Yeah, I might maybe re-ask the question.
Yeah. So
no, I would say, I think a huge component of what we're trying to do here, and part of this, the industry struggle, is through education. So many people don't even know what MassTimber are. People who know MassTimber are just obsessed with it, right? But how do we broaden the message and really broadcast the benefits of MassTimber and why it's great? So, for instance, we were at Climate Week last month in San Francisco, attending multiple events with investors and climate tech folks, and no one's heard of MassTimber. And this is, of all the groups in the world, you should know about MassTimber. The folks at Climate Week should know. So I think there's a huge gap in kind of knowledge even of MassTimber. And once we do tell people about MassTimber, and the fact that something we didn't even get into here, but the fact we're trying to utilize some of these wildfire-thinning fibers that might not typically be used in MassTimber, the story is just like people's jaws drop. What? Tell me more. The fact that we're trying to solve all these acute problems through this one really simple and elegant solution, I think, is super powerful. So it's not really an elevator pitch, but that's kind of, I think, a broader need for bigger education.
Depends on how long your elevator is.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm gonna take the easy route and kind of echo what Mark said a little bit. In that, it's like, yeah, as Mark kind of alluded to, right? Like, people in the MassTimber industry, like we feel like we're kind of in the center of the storm, right? Like in the eye of the storm, and that's, we eat, breathe, and sleep, dream about MassTimber. But if you just go just a little step outside of that, nobody really still knows what it is, right? We were talking with some folks who are doing research at the state on California state level procurement policies, and for their building, their official kind of state building and architecture teams, and they never even heard of MassTimber. Right? These are people that are, here in the state, it's driving initiatives like AB 2446. And there's still this huge disconnect between the people that are actually building the buildings and designing the buildings, who aren't even considering engineered wood products because they just don't even know about it. Right. So, I think there's this huge educational component to drive that awareness, to make it a, kind of a household name, if you will, alongside concrete and steel. And I really think that really kind of starts at the education level. At the early, we kind of need to plant those seeds early, if we're thinking long-term here, and this is a long-term commitment to California, a long-term commitment to MassTimber, we need to really be building that education base out. And that's a big push that we're working on, is working with a regional college, really close to the proximity of our site that we've secured, and are working with them on developing a curriculum, both, upstream at the forestry level, downstream at the site level and installation training. And then, directly at the manufacturing level, right? So everything from the folks that can do the 3D modeling and the digital twins, to the maintenance, maintenance engineers on the CNC equipment, presses, and everything kind of in between, right? So, really looking to build that knowledge base and showing, people that are coming out of universities and coming out of the trade schools, that this is, a new standard that they should know.
Yeah, I love it. It's going to take a whole community to move this thing forward, but in the end, like you gotta start with letting people know about what's going on, and then sharing with them the great work that's happening because of it. So I think you guys are absolutely right in both your answers. So I'm excited to watch you guys bring your dream and your mission into reality, and I hope that anybody listening, if they can help you, to reach out and connect with you, follow along with what you're doing. There's a ton of need for housing, ton of need for responsible forest management, and I think you guys are bringing both of those together, specific to your state, right, in California. And I think regional mass timber ecosystems are the most beneficial way to set these kind of things up. And so I love that you guys have a focus right there in your backyard, using both the resources but then solving the housing problems that you guys are facing. So I applaud you guys in your work, and I look forward to following along.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Brady.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.